The Duke of Ashmore would later remember the moment with painful clarity. Not the wedding, not the vows, not even the morning that changed everything. He would remember a careless laugh drifting across a London ballroom and the cruel nickname attached to a woman nobody thought worth noticing. "The forgettable Miss Ashford," someone whispered. The words disappeared beneath the music. Yet years later, Sebastian Wycliffe would still hear them. London, England. Autumn, 1864. Crystal chandeliers blazed above the ballroom of Haversham House, scattering golden light across polished marble floors and hundreds of elegantly dressed guests. Silk gowns shimmered, diamonds flashed, laughter rose and fell like waves against a shore. The season had entered its busiest weeks, and every ambitious family in London seemed determined to secure advantageous marriages before winter arrived. Near the center of the room, young debutantes gathered like bright flowers around eligible gentlemen. Mothers watched with strategic smiles. Fathers discussed fortunes and family connections. Every glance carried purpose. Every introduction concealed calculation. Yet beside a tall window overlooking the moonlit gardens stood a woman whom nobody seemed eager to approach. Lady Genevieve Ashford had become accustomed to invisibility. At 27 years old, she had attended enough balls to understand exactly how society worked. Beauty attracted attention. Wealth attracted proposals. Charm attracted admiration. She possessed none of those advantages in quantities large enough to excite London's imagination. Her gown was tasteful rather than dazzling. Her chestnut hair was arranged neatly rather than fashionably. Her features were pleasant rather than unforgettable. Most people forgot her within moments of meeting her. The realization no longer hurt as much as it once had. At least that was what she told herself. She lifted a porcelain teacup and watched dancers turn gracefully beneath the chandeliers. The orchestra played a lively waltz. Applause followed each completed set. Across the room, two young ladies were receiving introductions to a viscount recently returned from Oxfordshire. Their delighted expressions suggested they already imagined wedding bells. Genevieve smiled faintly. There had been a time when she imagined such things as well. "Hiding again?" a warm voice asked. She turned to find her cousin, Lady Eleanor Hartwell, approaching with an amused expression. Eleanor was 3 years younger and considerably more fashionable. Her blonde curls framed a face that artists would have loved to paint. Men noticed Eleanor immediately. Women often envied her. Genevieve adored her anyway. "Observing," Genevieve corrected gently. "There is a difference." Eleanor laughed. "You always say that. Because it remains true. You know what people think." "I do. And it does not bother you?" Genevieve considered the question. The honest answer would have required more vulnerability than she wished to offer. "Not as much as it used to." Eleanor studied her carefully. "That means it still bothers you." Genevieve glanced away toward the dance floor. "Everyone wishes to be seen, Eleanor. Some simply become skilled at pretending otherwise." For a moment neither woman spoke. The orchestra shifted into another melody. Several couples joined the floor. Others drifted toward refreshments. Around them conversations blended into a constant murmur. Then Genevieve heard the laughter. Two women stood several yards away near a column wrapped in autumn flowers. They were not attempting to lower their voices. "There she is." "Who?" "Lady Genevieve Ashford." Another laugh followed. "Ah, the forgettable Miss Ashford." Heat rose briefly into Genevieve's cheeks. Not because the words surprised her. They did not. Society possessed remarkable creativity when inventing ways to dismiss women. No. What unsettled her was how easily the nickname fit. The women continued speaking. "I cannot recall ever hearing a gentleman mention her. Perhaps that is because gentlemen cannot remember meeting her." More laughter. Eleanor stiffened instantly. "I shall say something." "No." Genevieve touched her arm. "Leave it alone. They are cruel. They are bored." Genevieve forced a calm smile. "There is a difference." Eleanor looked unconvinced but remained silent. Genevieve returned her attention to the ballroom. Outwardly she appeared composed. Years of practice made the performance effortless. Inside, however, a familiar ache settled quietly beneath her ribs. The nickname would spread. She already knew that. By tomorrow half of London would repeat it. By next week people would forget where it began. They would simply accept it as truth. The forgettable Miss Ashford. Perhaps they already had. Across the city, another carriage rolled through London's gaslit streets. Inside sat Sebastian Wickliffe, Duke of Ashmore. At 34 years old, he had become one of the most sought-after men in England. His title stretched back centuries. His estates covered thousands of acres. His fortune seemed to expand with every passing year. Mothers dreamed of securing him for their daughters. Daughters dreamed of securing him for themselves. Sebastian dreamed of none of it. Marriage had become an increasingly unavoidable subject. His mother reminded him regularly. His solicitor mentioned inheritance laws. Even members of Parliament occasionally offered subtle encouragement. Every conversation ended the same way. He needed a wife. He needed an heir. He needed to think beyond his own preferences. The reality irritated him. Marriage appeared less romantic every year. He had witnessed too many miserable unions disguised as respectable partnerships. Too many husbands and wives sharing houses while living entirely separate lives. If he married, he intended to do so sensibly. Emotion seemed an unreliable foundation for decisions carrying such enormous consequences. His carriage stopped before Haversham House. A footman opened the door. Moments later Sebastian entered the ballroom. The effect was immediate. Conversations softened. Heads turned. Mothers straightened. Daughters adjusted smiles. Genevieve noticed the shift before she saw the cause. A ripple moved through the crowd. Then the announcement came. His Grace, the Duke of Ashmore. Sebastian stepped inside beneath the chandeliers. Tall, composed, impeccably dressed. His dark evening coat fit perfectly across broad shoulders. Silver touched his temples just enough to make him appear distinguished rather than older. Confidence surrounded him naturally, not arrogance. Authority, the sort possessed by men accustomed to responsibility. Eleanor sighed dramatically. And there goes every unmarried woman in London. Genevieve almost laughed. Only every unmarried woman? You are impossible. Across the ballroom Sebastian exchanged greetings with several acquaintances. He accepted introductions, declined invitations with practiced politeness, avoided ambitious mothers with equally practiced skill. Then his attention drifted, not intentionally, merely out of habit. He preferred observing rooms before participating in them. That was when he noticed the woman standing by the window. She was not the most beautiful woman present. Several others clearly claimed that distinction. She was not surrounded by admirers. Nobody competed for her attention. Yet while everyone else seemed desperate to be noticed, she appeared perfectly content watching the evening unfold. Sebastian found himself curious. Only briefly, he asked a nearby gentleman, "Who is the lady by the window?" The gentleman followed his gaze. Lady Genevieve Ashford. Ashford. Her father was the late Earl of Blackmere. Sebastian nodded vaguely. The name sounded familiar. Unmarried. Yes. The gentleman hesitated. Though not for lack of opportunity, I assume. A faint smile appeared. One assumes many things in London. Accuracy is another matter entirely. Before Sebastian could respond, someone else claimed his attention. The conversation ended. Yet several times throughout the evening his gaze returned unexpectedly toward the window. Each time Lady Genevieve Ashford remained there, not hiding, observing, listening, thinking. Once he watched her help an elderly countess retrieve a dropped handkerchief. Another time he saw her quietly comfort a nervous debutante. Neither action appeared designed to attract notice. Most people never even saw them. For reasons he could not explain, Sebastian did. Near midnight Genevieve finally prepared to leave. The evening had exhausted her more than usual. The nickname lingered unpleasantly in her thoughts. She collected her gloves and moved toward the entrance. As she passed through a crowded corridor, two gentlemen stepped aside abruptly. One nearly collided with her. "My apologies, my lady. No harm done." She continued walking. Then another voice spoke nearby. Deep, calm, distinctly familiar. "Lady Genevieve." She stopped, turned, found herself facing the Duke of Ashmore. Surprise flickered across her features before she concealed it. "Your Grace." Sebastian bowed slightly. "I believe we have not been properly introduced." "I believe you are correct. Then perhaps we should remedy that oversight." For several seconds they regarded one another. Nothing dramatic occurred. No thunderbolt. No instant attraction. Simply two intelligent people noticing each other for the first time. "I hope you enjoyed the evening," Sebastian said. Genevieve almost smiled. "That depends entirely upon which portion of the evening you mean." His eyebrow lifted. A diplomatic answer. An honest one. To her surprise, amusement appeared briefly in his eyes. Honesty is increasingly rare. Only because most people do not reward it. The response escaped before she could stop it. For a moment silence hung between them. Then Sebastian laughed softly. Not mockingly. Genuinely. "Good evening, Lady Genevieve." "Good evening, Your Grace." He stepped aside. She continued toward the door. Neither realized how important the encounter would eventually become. Neither understood that their lives had already begun shifting toward one another. Behind them the ballroom continued sparkling beneath chandeliers. Music filled the air. Conversations flowed. Yet somewhere within the endless machinery of London society, the first invisible thread had quietly tightened into place. And neither of them saw it. Not yet. The following morning arrived wrapped in pale autumn sunlight and the distant sound of carriage wheels rattling over London's cobblestone streets. Genevieve Ashford sat at the breakfast table in her modest townhouse in Grosvenor Square, attempting to focus on a letter from her family's solicitor. The effort proved difficult. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the previous evening. Not because she had suddenly become a foolish romantic. At 27, she considered herself immune to such tendencies. Rather, she remained puzzled by the Duke of Ashmore's unexpected attention. Men of his position did not typically seek conversations with women like her. They certainly did not remember their names after a single evening. "You are thinking about him." Genevieve looked up to find Eleanor entering the breakfast room carrying a cup of tea. "Good morning to you as well." Eleanor settled into a chair opposite her. That was not a denial. Because there is nothing to deny. Genevieve folded the letter carefully. "I am merely curious." "Curious?" Eleanor repeated the word with obvious skepticism. "That sounds suspiciously romantic. Then perhaps you should spend less time reading novels." A laugh escaped her cousin. "You are impossible." Genevieve smiled despite herself. The conversation shifted toward more practical matters. Household accounts, charitable committees, an upcoming musicale. Yet throughout the morning she found herself distracted by an uneasy awareness she could not quite explain. Something had changed. Not in her circumstances. Those remained exactly the same. The sensation was subtler than that. As though the ordinary rhythm of her life had acquired an unexpected note. Across London, Sebastian Wickliffe sat in his private study at Ashmore House while his mother conducted what had become a familiar campaign. "You cannot postpone this forever." Dowager Duchess Margaret Wickliffe possessed the remarkable ability to sound both affectionate and relentless at the same time. Sebastian suspected it was a talent developed through decades of managing aristocratic society. "I am aware." He signed another document before setting down his pen. "Then perhaps you might begin acting as though you are aware." She crossed the room and seated herself opposite him. "You are 34 years old." "So I have been informed." Repeatedly. "Because it remains true." Margaret ignored the remark. "Your father inherited Ashmore at 29. My father also enjoyed being married." "Your father enjoyed your mother." The correction arrived instantly. Sebastian could not argue with that. His parents had shared a genuinely happy marriage. Such unions existed. He simply doubted they occurred often enough to justify building one's future upon the possibility. "Marriage requires compatibility," he said. "Not merely convenience." "I agree. Most people do not. Most people are not dukes." Margaret studied him carefully. "Tell me honestly, have you met anyone who interests you?" Sebastian considered several names. Beautiful women, accomplished women, intelligent women. None inspired a strong response. Then unexpectedly another face appeared in his thoughts. Chestnut hair, calm eyes. A woman standing quietly beside a ballroom window while the rest of society competed for attention. He frowned slightly. Margaret noticed immediately. Mothers always noticed. There is someone. No. Sebastian. There is not. The Dowager Duchess smiled. It was a dangerous smile. You hesitated. He regretted the hesitation instantly. I was thinking. About whom? Nobody of consequence. Now I am even more interested. Before the conversation could continue, the butler entered carrying correspondence. Several letters required Sebastian's attention. One came from his solicitor, another from a steward overseeing part of the Ashmore estate. A third concerned a parliamentary matter. Duty rescued him from further questioning. For the moment, 3 days later London society gathered once again. This time at the home of Lady Beatrice Holloway, whose afternoon reception attracted nearly every notable family in the city. Genevieve attended out of obligation rather than enthusiasm. She spent the carriage ride reminding herself not to expect anything unusual. The Duke of Ashmore occupied an entirely different world. Their brief conversation meant nothing. Rationally, she understood that. Unfortunately, human beings were not always rational creatures. The reception occupied a magnificent drawing room overlooking carefully landscaped gardens. Guests moved through clusters of conversation while servants circulated with refreshments. Genevieve greeted acquaintances, exchanged pleasantries, smiled when required. The familiar performance unfolded exactly as expected. Then she noticed several women glancing toward her and whispering. A familiar sinking feeling settled inside her. One of them laughed. Another lifted an eyebrow in obvious amusement. The nickname had spread. Of course it had. Lady Genevieve, a middle-aged countess, approached with the sort of expression people reserved for unfortunate relatives. I was delighted to hear you attended Haversham House. Genevieve recognized danger immediately. How kind! And met the Duke of Ashmore. There it was. Around them several women suddenly appeared interested in nearby flower arrangements. Nobody wanted to seem openly curious. Everyone wanted to listen. We exchanged greetings. Only greetings? Genevieve maintained a pleasant smile. What else would there have been? The Countess seemed disappointed. Another woman joined the conversation. Then another. Questions followed. Casual on the surface. Calculated underneath. Had the Duke danced with her? Had he visited? Had he written? Each inquiry carried the same implication. Surely there must be a reason such a man had spoken to such a woman. Genevieve answered politely, refused to encourage speculation. Eventually the group drifted elsewhere. Relief lasted less than 5 minutes. 2 younger ladies passed nearby. Neither realized she could hear them. Perhaps the Duke enjoys charitable causes. What do you mean? Speaking to the forgettable Miss Ashford was certainly an act of charity. Laughter followed. Not cruel laughter. That somehow made it worse. Casual dismissal often cut deeper than deliberate malice. Genevieve looked down at the teacup in her hand. For a brief moment she considered leaving. Then she straightened her shoulders. No, she would not flee because strangers found amusement in her existence. She had spent too many years allowing society to define her worth. Across the room a footman announced a new arrival. Conversations softened immediately. Genevieve did not need to look. She already knew. The Duke of Ashmore had entered. Sebastian noticed her almost at once. Not because she stood at the center of attention. Quite the opposite. She occupied her usual place near the edge of the gathering. Yet something about her expression caught his attention. Most people would have missed it. The slight tension around her eyes. The carefully controlled smile. The determination beneath both. He moved through the crowd exchanging greetings. Several ambitious mothers intercepted him. 2 eligible daughters attempted conversation. A viscount insisted upon discussing politics. Throughout it all Sebastian remained aware of Genevieve's presence. Eventually he found an opportunity to approach. Lady Genevieve. She turned. Genuine surprise crossed her face. Your Grace. You appear thoughtful. That is a diplomatic way of describing it. I am told diplomacy is useful. A faint smile appeared. Only when one wishes to avoid honesty. The response pleased him more than it should have. Most conversations in London followed predictable patterns. Speaking with Genevieve felt different. Less performative. More genuine. "May I join you?" he asked. Her surprise deepened. Of course. They began discussing books. Then travel. Then charitable work in rural communities. Minutes passed unnoticed. For the first time that afternoon Genevieve relaxed. She forgot the whispers, forgot the nickname, forgot every unkind remark she had overheard. Unfortunately, London society noticed everything. By evening at least 36 guests had witnessed the Duke of Ashmore spending nearly half an hour speaking with Lady Genevieve Ashford. Speculation erupted immediately. Some assumed a flirtation. Others predicted disappointment. Most simply enjoyed the entertainment. Sebastian remained unaware of the chaos he had created until later that night. He attended a private dinner hosted by an old friend. During the meal, one gentleman laughed and raised a glass. "Tell us, Ashmore, have you finally chosen a bride?" Sebastian nearly choked on his wine. "What nonsense is this? Everyone is talking about it. Everyone is always talking." Another guest grinned. "Not usually about you spending half an afternoon with the forgettable Miss Ashford." Silence followed. The nickname struck Sebastian unexpectedly. Not because it offended him, because it annoyed him. The woman he had spoken with possessed intelligence, composure, and quiet strength. Forgettable was the last word he would have chosen. "Her name is Lady Genevieve Ashford," he said calmly. Several gentlemen exchanged glances. The conversation moved on. Yet the irritation remained. Hours later, after returning home, Sebastian found himself standing beside a study window overlooking the dark city. He should have been reviewing estate reports. Instead, he was thinking about a woman who spent most social gatherings standing beside windows and observing the world around her. He did not understand why she lingered in his thoughts. He only knew that she did. And for the first time in many years, the prospect of marriage no longer seemed entirely theoretical. A week later, rain tapped softly against the windows of Ashmore House while Sebastian Wickliffe sat across from his solicitor in a room lined with generations of leather-bound books. A fire crackled in the marble hearth. The scent of polished wood and old paper filled the air. Ordinarily, these meetings focused on estate revenues, tenant concerns, investment opportunities, and parliamentary obligations. This morning the discussion took an entirely different direction. "Your Grace," Mr. Pembroke said carefully, adjusting his spectacles, "I hesitate to be repetitive." "Then do not be. Unfortunately, the matter remains important." Sebastian suppressed a sigh. "Marriage. Marriage." The solicitor offered an apologetic smile. "The succession of Ashmore requires attention. Ashmore is not in danger of vanishing. No, but uncertainty creates complications." Sebastian rose and crossed toward the window. Gray clouds hung low above London. Carriages moved through damp streets below. Somewhere beyond the city stretched thousands of acres carrying his name and responsibility. Generations had protected those lands. One day someone else would inherit them. Logic told him the issue mattered. Emotion remained unconvinced. "If I marry," he said at last, "I will not do so simply because people expect it. Then perhaps you should marry because it is wise." The solicitor paused. Wisdom and expectation occasionally agree. After Mr. Pembroke departed, Sebastian remained by the window longer than necessary. His thoughts drifted toward the same woman they had visited repeatedly over the past week. He found the pattern increasingly irritating. Lady Genevieve Ashford had become a persistent presence in his mind despite the fact that he barely knew her. Logic suggested he should forget her. Instead, he found himself recalling fragments of conversation. Her observations, her restraint, the intelligence hidden beneath her quiet demeanor. Most women sought to impress society. Genevieve seemed entirely uninterested in the effort. The quality fascinated him. Later that afternoon he paid a visit to his mother. The Dowager Duchess received him in her private sitting room. One glance at her expression confirmed she had already heard every rumor circulating through London. You have become popular discussion. Sebastian sat opposite her. I always was. Not for this reason. Which reason? Lady Genevieve Ashford. There it was. He should have expected nothing less. His mother maintained social awareness rivaling military intelligence networks. London grows imaginative when bored. London rarely invents fascination without encouragement. Margaret folded her hands. Tell me about her. There is nothing to tell. Sebastian. She is intelligent. The admission arrived before he could stop it. His mother's eyes brightened immediately. Continue. Composed. Go on. Kind. Interesting. He narrowed his eyes. Do not enjoy this. It is much too late for that. She smiled. Do you know what I find most curious? I fear you are about to tell me. You have described qualities, not appearance. Sebastian paused. The observation unsettled him because it was true. Most conversations regarding marriage candidates focused heavily upon beauty, fortune, family connections, and accomplishments. Yet whenever he thought of Genevieve, those details felt secondary. Beauty fades, he said finally. Character does not. Margaret stared at him for several seconds. Then she laughed. Good heavens! What? You truly are considering her. He rose immediately. I have estate matters requiring attention. Of course you do. Her amusement followed him all the way to the door. 2 days later, Genevieve sat at her writing desk reviewing household accounts. Numbers filled neat columns across the page. She preferred practical tasks. They required concentration. Concentration prevented excessive reflection. Unfortunately, even figures could not entirely silence the growing attention surrounding her name. Invitations had increased noticeably. So had curiosity. People who previously overlooked her now seemed eager to initiate conversation. None of it felt genuine. Most simply wanted information regarding the Duke of Ashmore. A knock sounded. Eleanor entered carrying a letter. Another invitation. Genevieve accepted the envelope. Please tell me it is not another reception. Worse. Worse. Lady Whitmore's autumn house party. Genevieve closed her eyes briefly. Lady Whitmore's gatherings attracted half of London's aristocracy. They also generated enough gossip to sustain newspapers for months. Perhaps I am ill. You are not. A tragic disappointment. Eleanor laughed before settling into a nearby chair. You know he will be there. Genevieve refused to look up. Many people will be there. That was not a denial. You spend too much time analyzing my responses. Someone must. Despite her efforts, a small smile appeared. Yet, after Eleanor left, Genevieve remained staring at the invitation. Her pulse had quickened slightly. The realization annoyed her. She was not a young debutante. She understood perfectly how these situations usually ended. Dukes did not marry women like her. Society viewed that reality as self-evident. A week later, Lady Whitmore's estate welcomed guests from across England. The countryside glowed with autumn colors. Gold leaves drifted from ancient trees. Rolling hills stretched beneath bright skies. Carriages arrived throughout the afternoon. Servants carried trunks. Guests reunited in drawing rooms filled with laughter and conversation. Genevieve arrived shortly before sunset. The manor stood atop a gentle rise overlooking dozens of acres. Warm light spilled from tall windows. Music drifted faintly through the evening air. Inside, Lady Whitmore greeted guests with theatrical enthusiasm. Genevieve, darling. She embraced her warmly. You look lovely. You are very kind. Nonsense. I am merely observant. The older woman lowered her voice. Several people are already hoping you attend tomorrow's dinner. Genevieve immediately understood. How flattering. How alarming, you mean? Lady Whitmore grinned. Do not worry. I enjoy watching society confuse itself. Before Genevieve could reply, another arrival drew attention. A footman announced the newest guest. Silence swept briefly through the entrance hall. Then came the name everyone recognized. His Grace, the Duke of Ashmore. Genevieve hated herself slightly for noticing him immediately. Sebastian entered carrying the effortless authority that always seemed to accompany him. Their eyes met across the room. The moment lasted only seconds. Yet something warm and unsettling passed through her chest. He crossed toward her. Guests pretended not to watch. Nobody succeeded. Lady Genevieve. Your Grace. I am pleased to see you. The simple statement should not have affected her. Somehow it did. And I you. A smile touched his face. Small, genuine, rare. The reaction among nearby observers was immediate. Genevieve practically felt speculation spreading through the room. Dinner that evening only intensified matters. Sebastian requested the seat beside her. Conversation flowed easily between them. They discussed books, estate management, travel, charitable efforts in rural communities. Hours passed with surprising speed. Across the table several guests exchanged increasingly curious glances. The next morning the entire house seemed aware that the Duke of Ashmore preferred Lady Genevieve Ashford's company. By afternoon the gossip had become impossible to ignore. Genevieve escaped into the gardens seeking peace. Gravel paths wound between hedges and late-season roses. Crisp air carried the scent of fallen leaves. For a while solitude soothed her thoughts. Then voices drifted from around a nearby hedge. She recognized neither speaker. Surely it cannot be serious. Of course not. A woman laughed softly. Ashmore requires a duchess, not a charity project. Genevieve stopped walking. Perhaps he enjoys the attention. Men enjoy many things. Marriage is another matter. More laughter followed. The forgettable Miss Ashford becoming Duchess of Ashmore? London would never recover. The women moved away still laughing. Genevieve remained where she stood. The words should not have hurt. She had heard similar sentiments for years. Yet something about this occasion felt different. Because for the first time there existed a possibility, however distant, that she might actually care about the outcome. Lady Genevieve? She turned sharply. Sebastian stood several yards away. Concern flickered across his expression. Forgive me. I did not mean to startle you. You did not. The lie sounded weak even to her own ears. His gaze studied her face. Not intrusive. Simply attentive. Something upset you. Nothing of consequence. I doubt that. For several seconds silence stretched between them. Then Genevieve looked away. People enjoy reminding me of my place. Understanding appeared almost immediately. He had heard enough rumors to interpret the meaning. People are frequently wrong. Sometimes. Often. She laughed softly despite herself. That is a very confident assessment. I am a duke. Confidence is practically a professional obligation. The response surprised a genuine smile from her. Something shifted in his expression when he saw it. Not admiration exactly. Something deeper. As though he had discovered a treasure others overlooked. Neither noticed the figure watching from a distant terrace. Lady Whitmore observed the exchange with growing interest. Beside her stood the Dowager Duchess Margaret Wycliffe, who had arrived earlier that afternoon. Well, Lady Whitmore murmured, this becomes fascinating. Margaret followed her gaze toward the gardens below. A slow smile appeared. No, she replied. I believe it is becoming inevitable. That evening, long after guests retired to their rooms, Sebastian remained awake in the manor library. Firelight danced across shelves filled with books. Outside, autumn wind brushed gently against the windows. He should have been reading. Instead, he found himself replaying a conversation in a garden path. People are frequently wrong. The words echoed back to him. Society believed it understood Lady Genevieve Ashford. Society believed she was forgettable, invisible, ordinary. Yet every day he spent near her revealed another contradiction. Intelligence, compassion, strength, quiet dignity, qualities many louder people lacked entirely. For the first time, a possibility began forming with unmistakable clarity. It arrived not as passion, not as fantasy, something far more dangerous, certainty. And once the thought appeared, he could not seem to dismiss it. The following morning he requested a private audience with his mother. By noon, the The Dowager Duchess emerged from that conversation smiling in a manner that terrified several servants. By evening, letters had already begun moving across England. And before the week ended, Genevieve Ashford would receive an offer capable of changing the entire course of her life. 3 days after leaving Lady Whitmore's estate, Genevieve sat in the small morning room of her townhouse with a book open in her lap and absolutely no idea what she had read during the previous 20 minutes. Her eyes moved across the page. Her mind remained elsewhere. Since returning to London, an unusual restlessness had followed her through each day. She blamed Lady Whitmore's house party. She blamed society's endless gossip. She blamed Eleanor's relentless curiosity. She blamed everything except the possibility she most wished to avoid. A knock interrupted her thoughts. The butler entered carrying a silver tray. Upon it rested a sealed envelope edged in dark blue. Genevieve immediately recognized the crest impressed into the wax. Her pulse stumbled. "This arrived moments ago, my lady." "Thank you, Harris." The door closed behind him. For several seconds she simply stared at the envelope. Then she broke the seal. The letter inside contained only a few lines written in a confident hand. "Lady Genevieve Ashford, I would be honored if you would receive me tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock. I have a matter of great importance to discuss. Sebastian Wickliffe, Duke of Ashmore." Genevieve read the note twice, then a third time. Eleanor entered the room at precisely the wrong moment. One glance at Genevieve's expression was enough. "What happened?" Genevieve handed her the letter. Eleanor read it. Her eyes widened dramatically. "Oh, that is not helpful." "No, it is extremely helpful." Eleanor looked up. "Do you realize what this means?" "No." "Liar." Genevieve rose and crossed toward the window. Outside, London moved through another gray autumn afternoon. Carriages rolled past. Shopkeepers greeted customers. Ordinary life continued entirely unaware that her own had suddenly become much more complicated. It may mean nothing. A duke does not request a private audience to discuss nothing. Perhaps he wishes to discuss charitable projects. Eleanor laughed so hard she nearly dropped the letter. "And perhaps I shall become Queen of England." The following afternoon arrived far too quickly. Genevieve changed her gown twice before finally choosing a simple blue silk dress. She immediately became annoyed with herself for caring. By 3:15, she sat in the drawing room attempting to appear calm. At precisely 3 o'clock, the butler announced the Duke of Ashmore. Sebastian entered carrying the same composed confidence he always seemed to possess. Yet today Genevieve noticed something different. Tension. Not obvious. Not enough for anyone else to detect. But it was there. He appeared almost nervous. The realization startled her. After exchanging greetings, they sat opposite one another. Silence lingered briefly. Then Sebastian spoke. "I have spent considerable time considering what I wish to say." "That sounds serious." "It is." He met her gaze directly. "I dislike wasting words." Genevieve folded her hands in her lap. "As do I." A faint smile appeared and disappeared. Then his expression grew serious once more. "Lady Genevieve, throughout my life I have been surrounded by people who valued appearances above substance, titles above character, wealth above integrity." She listened quietly. "You are not one of those people." Her heart began beating faster. "You honor me. I am merely stating a fact." Sebastian leaned forward slightly. "You possess intelligence, kindness, and strength. You treat others with dignity whether they can benefit you or not. You remain gracious even when society fails to offer you the same courtesy." Genevieve suddenly found breathing more difficult than usual. "Your Grace, please allow me to finish." She nodded. "I believe marriage should rest upon respect, trust, and shared values. Affection may grow where those foundations exist." He paused. The next words changed everything. "Lady Genevieve Ashford, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Silence filled the room. Complete silence. Outside, a carriage rattled past. Somewhere in the house a clock ticked softly. Genevieve stared at him. Not because she had misunderstood. Because she had understood perfectly. For years she had watched other women receive proposals. Never once had she imagined this moment belonging to her. Not like this. Not from him. You cannot be serious. The words escaped before she could stop them. To his credit, Sebastian did not appear offended. I assure you, I am entirely serious. But why? The question hung between them. His expression softened. Because I admire you. Her eyes widened slightly. Because I trust you. He continued before she could respond. Because I believe we would make excellent partners. And because when I consider the future, you are the woman I wish standing beside me. Emotion tightened unexpectedly in her chest. Yet alongside it came caution. Years of disappointment had taught her the value of caution. You scarcely know me. I know enough. Marriage is not a small decision. I agree. And affection does not guarantee happiness. A faint smile touched his lips. Good thing I did not mention affection. To her surprise, she laughed. The tension eased slightly. Sebastian watched her carefully. I am not offering a fairy tale. No. I am offering honesty. The sincerity in his voice made refusal unexpectedly difficult. You deserve time to consider. Thank you. Take all you need. He rose. She stood as well. For one brief moment neither moved. The future seemed suspended between them. Then Sebastian bowed. Whatever your answer, I shall respect it. After he departed, Genevieve remained standing in the center of the drawing room for nearly 10 minutes. Eventually Eleanor found her there. Well, Genevieve looked at her cousin. He proposed. Eleanor screamed. 3 days later, Genevieve accepted. London erupted. The announcement spread through drawing rooms, ballrooms, dining rooms, country estates, and gentlemen's clubs with astonishing speed. Some people expressed delight. Others expressed disbelief. Many simply demanded details. The Duke of Ashmore was marrying Lady Genevieve Ashford. The news dominated conversation throughout the city. Reactions varied dramatically. Perhaps he fell in love. Nonsense. Then why choose her? No idea. Surely there were other candidates. Through it all, Genevieve maintained a calm exterior. Privately, however, she struggled to adjust. 1 month earlier society barely noticed her. Now strangers analyzed everything from her gowns to her future household management. The attention felt overwhelming. Sebastian, meanwhile, approached the engagement with characteristic efficiency. Wedding arrangements progressed quickly. Contracts were reviewed. Guest lists expanded. Estates prepared for their future duchess. Yet, despite the practical activity, a quiet understanding gradually formed between them. They met frequently, spoke often, learned one another's habits and opinions. Respect deepened. Comfort followed. If love existed, neither named it. Winter arrived shortly before the wedding. Snow dusted rooftops across London. Church bells echoed through cold morning air. On the day of the ceremony, hundreds gathered to witness the union. Aristocrats filled the chapel. Society's most influential families occupied polished wooden pews. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting jeweled colors across stone floors. Genevieve stood in a private chamber preparing for the ceremony. Eleanor adjusted her veil one final time. How do you feel? Genevieve considered the question carefully. Terrified. Eleanor laughed. Good. That means you are sane. Thank you for the reassurance. Yet beneath the nervousness lay something steadier. Hope. Not the reckless hope of a young girl chasing impossible dreams. Something quieter. More mature. Hope built upon respect. Across the chapel, Sebastian waited beside the altar. Guests watched him closely. Many still appeared puzzled by his choice. He noticed the looks, ignored them. For perhaps the first time in his life, society's opinion seemed remarkably unimportant. Then the music began. Everyone rose. Genevieve entered the chapel on her uncle's arm. A hush swept through the gathering. Sebastian turned. Their eyes met. For one suspended moment, the crowd disappeared. The whispers disappeared. The speculation disappeared. Only the two of them remained. Genevieve reached the altar. The ceremony proceeded with solemn dignity. Vows were exchanged. Promises spoken. Rings blessed. When the final words were pronounced, Lady Genevieve Ashford ceased to exist. In her place stood Genevieve Wickliffe, Duchess of Ashmore. Applause filled the chapel. Smiles surrounded them. Congratulations followed from every direction. Yet beneath the celebration, another story had already begun moving quietly forward. Neither Sebastian nor Genevieve could see it yet. Neither understood that the greatest revelation of their marriage still waited ahead, and it would arrive sooner than either of them imagined. The wedding celebrations continued long into the evening. Music echoed through the grand halls of Ashmore House. Crystal chandeliers illuminated smiling faces. Toasts were offered. Well wishes filled the air. Every guest seemed determined to celebrate the union of one of England's most powerful dukes and his unexpected bride. Through it all, Genevieve carried herself with grace. She accepted congratulations, smiled when appropriate, thanked guests sincerely. Yet beneath her calm exterior, everything felt slightly unreal. Less than 2 months earlier she had stood alone beside ballroom windows while society dismissed her existence. Now she occupied the center of every room she entered. The transformation was so sudden that part of her still expected someone to announce a mistake had been made. Late that evening, after the final guests retired and the house gradually quieted, Genevieve stood alone for a moment in one of Ashmore House's upper corridors. Tall windows overlooked snow-covered gardens. Moonlight painted silver patterns across the floor. The silence felt almost sacred after the noise of the day. She released a slow breath. Regretting it already? The familiar voice came from behind her. She turned. Sebastian stood several feet away. His evening coat had been removed. The formality of the day had softened slightly around him. Not yet. A faint smile appeared on his face. That sounds encouraging. I thought so. For several moments they simply stood together. No audience. No expectations. No curious observers watching every interaction. Just two people who had made an enormous decision and were still attempting to understand what it meant. Are you tired? He asked. Very. So am I. Genevieve laughed softly. That may be the first reassuring thing I have heard all day. His expression warmed. Then I shall try to be reassuring more often. The simple statement lingered unexpectedly between them. Not because it was romantic, because it felt sincere. Eventually Sebastian offered his arm. Come. Tomorrow will arrive whether we are prepared for it or not. Together they walked deeper into the vast house that would now be their home. The following morning began before sunrise. A faint winter light filtered through heavy curtains. Ashmore House remained quiet. Most of the household still slept. Genevieve woke earlier than usual. Years of habit made sleeping late nearly impossible. For several moments she remained still, adjusting to unfamiliar surroundings. Then reality settled gently over her. She was married. She was Duchess of Ashmore. The realization felt both astonishing and oddly peaceful. Rather than summon servants immediately, she dressed simply and left her chambers. Curiosity pulled her through the corridors. Ashmore House was enormous. The estate had belonged to Sebastian's family for generations. Portraits lined the walls. Ancient clocks marked the passing hours. Every room seemed to contain another layer of history. Genevieve wandered quietly through the house while dawn gradually brightened the windows. Eventually she discovered a staircase leading toward a section of the estate she had not yet explored. At its end stood a large room overlooking the eastern grounds. The door stood partially open. Voices drifted through the narrow gap. She paused automatically. The figures cannot be correct. The speaker was Sebastian. His tone remained calm but firm. We checked them twice, Your Grace. Another man answered. Then check them again. Genevieve hesitated. She had no wish to interrupt business matters. Yet before she could retreat, Sebastian noticed movement near the doorway. Genevieve. She stepped inside. Forgive me. I did not mean to intrude. You are not intruding. He rose immediately. You are free to enter any room in this house. The reassurance eased some of her discomfort. The room appeared to function as an estate office. Ledgers covered a large table. Maps hung upon the walls. Several clerks stood nearby looking deeply surprised by the appearance of their new duchess. Sebastian introduced them. Genevieve exchanged polite greetings. Then her attention drifted toward the open ledger occupying the center of the table. Numbers filled the pages. Columns, accounts, expenditures, agricultural yields, tenant records. Years earlier she might have ignored them entirely. Instead she found herself reading automatically. A small crease appeared between her brows. Sebastian noticed. Something wrong. She looked up. Perhaps nothing. One of the clerks shifted awkwardly. Your Grace. We were discussing discrepancies in the Eastern District reports. Genevieve glanced back at the ledger. Then at the corresponding figures in another book. Her eyes moved quickly across the columns. A minute passed. Then another. Finally she pointed toward a line near the bottom of the page. The discrepancy begins here. Silence followed. The clerk blinked. Excuse me? Genevieve turned the ledger slightly. This number was copied incorrectly from the previous report. The error repeats through 3 separate calculations. The room became very quiet. One clerk checked the page. Then another. A third retrieved additional records. Moments later surprise spread across every face. Good heavens! She is correct. That changes the entire total. Genevieve looked mildly embarrassed. I am sorry. I did not mean to interfere. Sebastian stared at her. You found that in less than 2 minutes. The mistake was obvious. None of the clerks appeared to agree. One elderly accountant actually looked impressed. Your Grace, he said carefully. We have spent most of the morning searching for that error. Genevieve blinked. Oh, Sebastian said nothing. Yet, as the meeting continued, he found himself watching her more than the ledgers. Curiosity stirred. During their courtship they had discussed books, charitable work, and society. They had never spoken in detail about estate management. Later that morning another surprise followed. A housekeeper approached with concerns regarding winter supplies for several tenant families. Before Sebastian could respond, Genevieve asked a series of practical questions. Quantities, transportation routes, storage capacity, costs. Within minutes she proposed a solution that reduced expenses while improving distribution efficiency. Again the staff appeared impressed. Again, Genevieve seemed entirely unaware she had done anything remarkable. By afternoon Sebastian's curiosity had grown impossible to ignore. He found her in the library reviewing correspondence. Sunlight streamed through tall windows. Snow glittered beyond the glass. May I ask you something? She looked up from her writing. Of course. How much experience do you have managing accounts? A faint smile appeared. More than most people realize. He sat opposite her. I am beginning to suspect that. Genevieve closed the letter she had been reading. For a moment she seemed uncertain how much to reveal. After my father died, our circumstances changed considerably. Sebastian nodded. He knew the broad outline of the story. The late Earl of Blackmere had left significant debts. Much of the family's fortune had disappeared. Someone needed to manage what remained. You. Yes. Her tone remained matter-of-fact. There was no alternative. Sebastian leaned back slightly. And nobody thought to mention that my future duchess possessed the talents of a seasoned estate manager? A laugh escaped her. That sounds far more impressive than reality. Does it? I merely did what was necessary. The answer should have satisfied him. Instead it raised new questions. Throughout the afternoon he continued noticing small things. Servants seemed comfortable approaching her. Staff listened when she spoke. Problems resolved themselves unusually quickly around her. None of it appeared forced. People simply trusted her. That evening they attended a small family dinner hosted by the Dowager Duchess. Several relatives had remained at Ashmore House after the wedding. Conversation flowed easily. At one point Sebastian's cousin mentioned difficulties managing a rural property. Before anyone else could respond, Genevieve offered practical advice. The solution was elegant, sensible, effective. The table fell briefly silent. That is actually excellent counsel, the cousin admitted. Genevieve looked surprised. It seemed obvious. Sebastian hid a smile behind his wineglass. Later, after dinner ended, the Dowager Duchess intercepted her son in the corridor. You are staring. Sebastian frowned. I am not. You absolutely are. Margaret's eyes sparkled with amusement. You keep looking at your wife as though she is a puzzle. Perhaps she is. And what have you discovered? He considered the question carefully. The answer unsettled him. That I know far less about her than I believed. The Dowager Duchess smiled knowingly. An excellent beginning. That night, long after the household slept, Sebastian remained awake in his private study. Snow drifted softly beyond the windows. A fire burned low in the hearth. Several estate ledgers rested open across his desk. He examined them again. Not because the figures required attention, because he kept replaying the morning's events. Genevieve had identified errors experienced accountants missed, proposed solutions seasoned administrators admired, navigated practical challenges with effortless confidence. None of it matched society's image of the quiet woman once dismissed as forgettable. Sebastian opened another ledger. His eyes drifted toward a section detailing charitable expenditures across various counties. Several entries caught his attention. Large anonymous donations made over the past few years. Funds directed toward struggling tenant families. Educational programs. Medical assistance. Rural relief efforts. The handwriting accompanying many of the approvals looked strangely familiar. He studied the page more closely. A thoughtful expression settled across his face. For the first time, a question emerged. Not who Genevieve was. He was beginning to understand that. The more important question was how much of her remained hidden, and why no one, including him, had ever bothered to look closely enough to see it. Winter settled fully over England during the weeks that followed. Snow covered the fields surrounding Ashmore Estate in a blanket of white. Frost painted delicate patterns across windows each morning. Smoke curled from hundreds of chimneys as families sought warmth against the cold. Inside Ashmore House, however, life grew unexpectedly comfortable. Genevieve adapted to her new responsibilities with remarkable ease. Staff members who had initially viewed their new duchess with cautious curiosity now sought her advice regularly. Household efficiency improved. Minor disputes disappeared. Charitable programs expanded. Even the gardeners seemed happier. Sebastian noticed everything. The more he observed, the more questions emerged. One snowy afternoon he stood beside a window in the estate office reviewing correspondence from neighboring landowners. A particular name caught his attention. Mr. Thomas Ellsworth, the owner of a small property bordering Ashmore lands. Attached to the letter was a note thanking the estate for assistance provided 3 winters earlier during a severe harvest failure. Sebastian frowned slightly. He did not remember authorizing such assistance. Curious, he searched through older records. The answer appeared almost immediately. Anonymous financial support had been sent. Food shipments had followed. Additional aid continued for nearly 8 months. The authorization signature looked familiar. Very familiar. He stared at the page. Then at another. Then another. The same handwriting appeared repeatedly. Different villages. Different families. Different counties. Yet the signature remained consistent. Not Genevieve's name. Merely a discrete initial, G. His curiosity sharpened. Later that afternoon he visited the archives room. Dust-covered ledgers lined shelves stretching from floor to ceiling. Years of estate history rested quietly within those pages. Most people would have found the task painfully dull. Sebastian felt oddly compelled. For nearly 2 hours he reviewed records. By the end, a pattern had emerged. Anonymous charitable contributions. Emergency loans never collected. Educational grants. Medical assistance. Agricultural support. The same initial appeared repeatedly. Sometimes attached to small amounts. Sometimes attached to sums large enough to attract attention if anyone had known their source. Nobody appeared to know. That evening he carried several ledgers into his private study. A fire glowed warmly in the hearth. Outside, snow drifted through the darkness. Sebastian sat alone, examining the evidence spread across his desk. One document in particular held his attention. It detailed financial support sent to a rural school after a flood had damaged part of the building years earlier. The funds had arrived anonymously. The headmaster's letter expressed gratitude toward an unknown benefactor. Attached correspondence revealed another detail. The money had originated from assets belonging to the late Earl of Blackmere, Genevieve's father. Sebastian leaned back slowly. A realization began forming. The next morning he requested a meeting with Mr. Holloway, the estate's senior accountant. The elderly man had served Ashmore House for nearly 30 years and remembered details most people forgot. After exchanging formal greetings, Sebastian placed several documents across the desk. "Tell me about these." Mr. Holloway adjusted his spectacles. His expression changed almost immediately. "Ah, you recognize them." "Of course." The accountant smiled faintly. "Her Grace would probably prefer I said nothing." Sebastian became even more interested. "Then it is indeed Genevieve." Mr. Holloway hesitated. "Your Grace, you may answer honestly." The older man studied him carefully before nodding. "Yes." Silence followed. Sebastian waited. Eventually Mr. Holloway continued. "The late Earl's financial difficulties were more severe than most people realized. I know he left debts. Considerably more than debts." The accountant folded his hands. "When the Earl passed away, many expected the family to lose nearly everything." Sebastian listened quietly. "Her Grace prevented that outcome." "How?" "By sacrificing much of her own inheritance." The words landed heavily. Mr. Holloway continued. "She sold personal assets, delayed repairs to family properties, reduced household expenses, managed investments herself, negotiated with creditors." Sebastian frowned. "At what age?" 21. He stared at the older man. 21. "Yes, Your Grace." "Mr." Holloway smiled sadly. "Most young ladies her age worried about dances and courtship. Lady Genevieve spent her days studying ledgers." Something tightened unexpectedly inside Sebastian's chest. "Why did nobody know?" "Because she never told anyone." The answer arrived instantly. Many people assumed her family recovered through luck. Others credited distant relatives. Her Grace never corrected them. Sebastian looked down at the documents again. Suddenly they seemed different. No longer records. Evidence. Evidence of a life few people had bothered to understand. The conversation ended shortly afterward. Yet the revelations followed him throughout the day. Everywhere he looked he found new traces of Genevieve's influence. The village school near the southern boundary. Improved because of funding she quietly arranged. Several tenant families. Protected by assistance she personally organized. A widow receiving annual support. Anonymous. Consistent. Reliable. Genevieve had spent years helping others while allowing society to believe she possessed little value herself. The contradiction disturbed him. 2 days later Ashmore House hosted a winter gathering attended by several neighboring aristocratic families. The event was relatively small by London standards. Even so, dozens of guests filled the drawing rooms. Music drifted through the halls. Conversations flowed easily. Genevieve moved among visitors with her usual quiet confidence. She never sought attention. Yet increasingly people seemed drawn toward her regardless. Sebastian observed the pattern from across the room. He was beginning to understand why. She listened carefully when others spoke, remembered details, offered kindness without making a performance of it. The qualities were rare. Unfortunately, not everyone appreciated them. During the evening, Lady Victoria Hensley arrived. Wealthy, beautiful, widowed, and notoriously critical. Years earlier many had expected her to become Duchess of Ashmore. She had never entirely forgiven fate for choosing otherwise. Sebastian noticed her immediately. The expression in her eyes promised trouble. Sure enough, less than half an hour later she approached a conversation circle where Genevieve stood speaking with several guests. "Your Grace." Victoria's smile looked pleasant from a distance. Up close it carried sharper edges. Genevieve greeted her politely. "Lady Victoria, I was just telling everyone how surprising your marriage has been." Several nearby guests exchanged nervous glances. Genevieve remained calm. "Life often contains surprises." "Indeed." Victoria laughed lightly. "Some more unexpected than others." The atmosphere shifted. Everyone felt it. Nobody intervened. The Duke has always been known for practicality, Victoria continued, which makes his choice so fascinating. Genevieve understood perfectly. So did everyone else. Does it? Certainly. Victoria tilted her head. Most men in his position pursue beauty, fortune, or powerful family alliances. Yet his Grace selected. She paused deliberately. Character. Several guests looked horrified. Victoria had managed to insult Genevieve while pretending to compliment her. The tactic was unfortunately effective. Silence settled across the group. Genevieve could have ignored the remark. Usually she would have. Before she could respond, another voice entered the conversation. Calm, deep, unmistakably authoritative. Character is frequently underestimated. Every head turned. Sebastian approached slowly. The room seemed to straighten around his presence. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. Your Grace. Sebastian offered a polite nod. Then his attention shifted toward Genevieve. Not Victoria. Not the crowd. Only Genevieve. I was looking for my wife. The simple statement carried unexpected weight. Something warm flickered through Genevieve's chest. Victoria recovered quickly. We were discussing admirable qualities. Then you chose an excellent subject. Sebastian's tone remained perfectly courteous. That somehow made the response even more effective. A few nearby guests struggled to hide smiles. Victoria's expression tightened. Of course. Sebastian extended his arm toward Genevieve. Would you join me? She placed her hand lightly upon his sleeve. Together they moved away. The conversation behind them dissolved almost immediately. Once they reached a quieter section of the room, Genevieve looked up at him. You did not need to do that. Perhaps not. Lady Victoria was merely being Lady Victoria. A faint smile touched his face. A terrifying concept. To her surprise, Genevieve laughed. The sound seemed to please him. For a moment neither spoke. Then Sebastian's expression grew thoughtful. Why did you never tell anyone? She blinked. Tell anyone what? Everything. Confusion appeared in her eyes. Genuine confusion. I am afraid that answer clarifies nothing. He studied her carefully. The schools, the families, the financial assistance, your inheritance. Understanding dawned slowly. Then embarrassment followed. You spoke with Mr. Holloway. Among others. Genevieve looked away. There was nothing worth discussing. Sebastian stared at her in disbelief. You sacrificed years of your life protecting your family. Many people would have done the same. Not all of them. Perhaps not. She shrugged lightly. It was necessary. The answer frustrated him. Not because it was wrong. Because she seemed genuinely unable to recognize the magnitude of what she had accomplished. You saved people. I helped where I could. You changed lives. Anyone with resources should help others. Sebastian fell silent. For several moments he simply looked at her. Finally he shook his head. You truly believe that? Of course. The simplicity of the response struck him harder than any elaborate speech could have. Most people performed generosity. Genevieve treated it as ordinary responsibility. At that moment he understood something important. Society had never failed to notice her because she lacked value. Society had failed because it looked in the wrong direction. And for the first time since their marriage, Sebastian felt something beyond admiration beginning to take root. Something deeper. Something far more dangerous. He was no longer merely discovering who Genevieve truly was. He was beginning to wonder how he had ever overlooked her in the first place. The first signs appeared in ways so subtle that Sebastian almost missed them. A lingering smile when Genevieve read a particular letter. A softness in her voice when a certain name appeared in conversation. A familiarity that suggested years rather than months. Had the signs belonged to anyone else, he might never have noticed. Unfortunately, he had begun noticing everything about his wife. February arrived with clearer skies and slightly warmer afternoons. The worst of winter had passed. Across Ashmore Estate, preparations for spring quietly began. Farmers reviewed planting schedules. Gardeners planned seasonal displays. Carriages traveled more easily along roads no longer buried beneath snow. One morning Genevieve sat in the morning room sorting correspondence while sunlight spilled through tall windows. Several letters concerned charitable organizations. Others involved estate matters. One, however, immediately caught her attention. The handwriting alone brought a smile to her face. Sebastian happened to enter the room at that exact moment. He stopped, not because she was smiling, because the smile looked different, unguarded, familiar, personal. Genevieve opened the letter and began reading. By the time she finished, she was laughing softly to herself. Sebastian found the reaction strangely irritating. Good news. She looked up. Very. May I ask from whom? An old friend. The answer should have been sufficient. Instead it produced an unfamiliar sensation beneath his ribs. A close friend. One of the closest. She folded the letter carefully. We have known each other for years. Sebastian nodded once. Calmly, rationally. Entirely unlike a man who suddenly wished to know every detail about a person he had never met. I see. Genevieve appeared unaware of his reaction. Nathaniel is returning to England after nearly 2 years abroad. Sebastian's expression remained neutral. Nathaniel. Lord Nathaniel Evermont. Her smile widened. You would like him. That seemed unlikely. 3 weeks later Lord Nathaniel Evermont arrived in London. By every reasonable measure, Sebastian should have appreciated the man. Nathaniel possessed excellent manners, a respected family, considerable intelligence, a distinguished military record. He was generous, thoughtful, and well-liked by nearly everyone who met him, which made Sebastian's growing dislike particularly inconvenient. The first meeting occurred during a luncheon hosted at Ashmore House. Genevieve practically glowed when Nathaniel entered the room. Not romantically, Sebastian recognized the difference. Yet the warmth between them was impossible to ignore. Nathaniel. Genevieve crossed the room immediately. You are finally home. The gentleman smiled broadly. At last. He bowed before taking her hands. You look happy. I am. Good. Genuine affection filled his voice. I was hoping for that. Sebastian approached moments later. Formal introductions followed. Nathaniel greeted him with effortless courtesy. Your Grace, it is an honor. Lord Evermont. They shook hands. Everything appeared perfectly civil. Only Sebastian seemed aware of the irrational annoyance settling inside him. Throughout luncheon the problem worsened. Nathaniel knew stories Sebastian had never heard. Memories from years before their marriage. Conversations. Shared experiences. Genevieve laughed more than usual. She seemed relaxed in a way Sebastian rarely witnessed. Watching them together created a strange feeling he could neither justify nor dismiss. At one point Nathaniel recalled an incident involving a broken carriage wheel during a charitable trip to Yorkshire. Genevieve laughed so hard tears appeared in her eyes. I had forgotten that. Impossible. Nathaniel grinned. You lectured the blacksmith for nearly 15 minutes. Because he was trying to cheat a widow. And because you terrified him. More laughter followed. Sebastian stared at his wineglass. Apparently his wife had once terrified blacksmiths. Interesting. Why had he never heard this story? Later that afternoon, after Nathaniel departed, the Dowager Duchess discovered her son standing beside a library window with a distinctly unhappy expression. She studied him for several seconds, then smiled. Oh dear. Sebastian frowned. What? You are jealous. I am not. Of course you are. That is ridiculous. Margaret settled into a nearby chair. Is it? Nathaniel Evermont is simply an old friend. Precisely. Her eyes sparkled with amusement. That is why it bothers you. Sebastian stared at her. Nothing bothers me. The Dowager Duchess laughed openly. You looked ready to challenge the poor man to a duel over dessert. I did not. No. You are much too civilized for that. She paused, which somehow made it more obvious. The conversation ended only because Sebastian wisely chose retreat over further embarrassment. Unfortunately, retreat did nothing to improve matters. During the following weeks Nathaniel became a regular visitor. Not excessively, merely often enough to remain noticeable. He joined estate dinners, accompanied charitable projects, participated in social events. Everywhere he went, Genevieve seemed genuinely pleased by his presence. Sebastian hated that he noticed. He hated even more that he cared. One afternoon, a charitable committee meeting took place in a nearby village. Genevieve attended. So did Nathaniel. Sebastian had intended to remain at Ashmore House. Then he discovered himself climbing into a carriage 30 minutes later. Pure coincidence, naturally. The village hall buzzed with activity when he arrived. Local leaders discussed educational initiatives, funding needs, community improvements. Sebastian entered quietly. Nobody noticed him immediately, including Genevieve. She stood near the front of the room speaking with Nathaniel. The sight stopped him unexpectedly. They were laughing, not because of anything dramatic, because they clearly enjoyed one another's company. Years of friendship created an easy familiarity. Nathaniel listened attentively when she spoke. Genevieve never appeared self-conscious around him. Sebastian felt irrationally annoyed by both facts. Then something happened that surprised him. A local teacher approached Genevieve carrying several reports. Nathaniel stepped aside. For nearly 20 minutes Sebastian watched his wife lead a complex discussion involving finances, educational planning, and resource allocation. Every person in the room listened, not because she was a duchess, because she knew exactly what she was doing. Respect filled every interaction. Admiration followed naturally. By the end of the meeting, several committee members openly praised her leadership. Nathaniel smiled throughout the entire exchange. Not possessively, proudly, as though her success genuinely pleased him. The realization unsettled Sebastian more than anything else. Because Nathaniel saw exactly what Sebastian had only recently begun discovering. That evening, after returning home, Sebastian found himself unable to concentrate. Estate reports sat unread upon his desk. Correspondence remained unanswered. Every attempt at productivity failed. Eventually he surrendered and poured himself a glass of brandy. A knock sounded moments later. "Enter." Genevieve stepped inside. "I hope I am not interrupting." "Not at all." She smiled. "Nathaniel asked me to thank you." Sebastian stiffened slightly. "For what?" "Your donation to the village school project." He blinked. How did he know? Because he helped organize it. Of course he did. Genevieve crossed toward the fireplace. He has always cared deeply about those communities. Sebastian studied her quietly. "You admire him." The words escaped before he could stop them. Surprise flickered across her face. Then understanding followed. "Very much." His chest tightened. "I see." Genevieve tilted her head slightly. "You misunderstand." "Do I?" A soft laugh escaped her. "Yes." She moved closer. "Nathaniel is like family." Sebastian said nothing. "When father died, many people disappeared." Her voice softened. Friends vanished. Relatives lost interest. Society became less welcoming. He listened carefully. Nathaniel never left. Emotion warmed her eyes. "He helped when no one else did. He believed in me when most people barely noticed I existed." Silence followed. Then another realization arrived. Nathaniel had witnessed parts of Genevieve's life Sebastian would never fully understand. The difficult years, the sacrifices, the loneliness, the struggle. Instead of increasing his jealousy, the thought produced something else. Gratitude, unexpected and genuine. "Then I owe him thanks." Genevieve smiled. "That is remarkably generous. Do not become accustomed to it." Her laughter filled the room. Warm, bright, beautiful. For a moment Sebastian simply watched her. Then something shifted. Not dramatically. Not enough for her to notice. Yet unmistakably. The jealousy remained. But beneath it lay a deeper truth. He was no longer merely fascinated by his wife. He was beginning to fear what life might feel like if her smiles belonged to someone else. And that realization followed him long after she left the room, lingering quietly in the darkness like a truth he was not yet ready to name. Spring arrived in London with all the elegance and chaos society could produce. Gardens burst into color. Carriages crowded fashionable streets. Ballrooms reopened their doors. The social season awakened with renewed energy after the long winter months. For Genevieve, the transition brought more invitations than she had received during the previous 5 years combined. Everywhere she went, people seemed eager to speak with her. Some were sincere. Others merely wished to stand close to a duchess whose marriage continued to fascinate the city. Genevieve accepted the attention politely. She trusted very little of it. One afternoon, while reviewing correspondence in the library at Ashmore House, she received an invitation that immediately caught her attention. Lady Beaumont's annual spring gala. It was among the most prestigious social events of the season. Nobility from across England attended. Politicians mingled with aristocrats. Alliances formed. Rumors spread. Reputations rose and fell beneath crystal chandeliers and polite smiles. "You are thinking too hard." Genevieve looked up to find Sebastian entering the room. He removed his gloves and placed them upon a nearby table. "That sounds familiar." "It should. You say it to me often enough." A smile touched her lips. "Lady Beaumont's gala." He glanced toward the invitation. "Ah, you do not sound enthusiastic." "Because Lady Beaumont enjoys drama almost as much as she enjoys champagne." Genevieve laughed softly. "A dangerous combination." "Extremely." Sebastian crossed toward her desk. His gaze lingered briefly on her face. "Would you prefer not to attend?" "No." She folded the invitation. "I spent years standing at the edges of such gatherings. It seems foolish to avoid them now." Something thoughtful appeared in his expression. "You should never have been standing at the edges." The comment surprised her. Before she could respond, he looked away. Yet the warmth left behind remained long after the conversation ended. 3 nights later, Ashmore House prepared for the gala. Servants moved efficiently through corridors. Carriages waited outside beneath lantern light. The atmosphere carried the familiar anticipation accompanying major social events. Genevieve stood before a mirror while her maid adjusted the final details of her gown. Soft silver silk shimmered beneath candlelight. Elegant without being excessive. Refined without demanding attention. Precisely the style Genevieve preferred. "His Grace will be speechless." The maid smiled. Genevieve shook her head. "His Grace is rarely speechless." The maid laughed. Tonight might be the exception. Downstairs, Sebastian waited in the entrance hall. When Genevieve descended the staircase, conversation disappeared from his mind entirely. For several seconds he simply looked at her. She noticed immediately. "Is something wrong?" He blinked. "No. You appear concerned." "I am not concerned." Pause followed. Then he added quietly, "You look beautiful." Genevieve froze. The compliment should not have affected her. Yet something in his voice felt different. Honest. Unrehearsed. Unexpected. Color touched her cheeks. "Thank you." Sebastian offered his arm. Neither spoke during the first few minutes of the carriage ride. Both seemed unusually aware of the other's presence. By the time they arrived at Beaumont Hall, the silence had become almost comfortable. Almost. The gala glittered with extraordinary grandeur. Hundreds of candles illuminated vast chandeliers. Musicians performed from an elevated platform. Marble floors reflected light like still water. Every corner of the ballroom sparkled with wealth, influence, and ambition. Conversations filled the air. Laughter echoed beneath painted ceilings. Genevieve entered beside Sebastian. Heads turned immediately. She had grown accustomed to attention. Tonight, however, the attention felt different. More intense. More deliberate. Sebastian noticed it too. Several gentlemen watched her with open admiration. More than one lady appeared openly surprised by how elegant the Duchess of Ashmore looked. The reactions pleased him far more than they should have. For the first hour, the evening progressed smoothly. They greeted acquaintances, danced once, shared conversations with friends and relatives. Nathaniel appeared briefly and joined them for refreshments. Everything seemed perfectly pleasant. Then Lady Victoria Hensley arrived. Sebastian noticed her instantly. So did Genevieve. Neither considered that a positive development. Victoria entered wearing crimson silk and enough diamonds to finance a small estate. Attention followed her naturally. She welcomed it. Unfortunately, she also appeared unusually determined. "This should be interesting," Nathaniel murmured quietly. Genevieve sighed. "That is not reassuring." Nathaniel smiled sympathetically. "I know." For a time Victoria merely circulated through the crowd, speaking, smiling, gathering listeners. Then she gradually positioned herself near one of the ballroom's most visible conversation circles. Several influential guests joined her. Members of parliament, noble families, wealthy landowners. Eventually Genevieve found herself drawn into the group through entirely innocent circumstances. Sebastian stood nearby discussing estate matters with another gentleman. Nathaniel had wandered toward the orchestra. Everything appeared harmless, until Victoria began speaking. "I was just remarking how remarkable this season has become." She smiled gracefully. "Unexpected marriages continue surprising everyone." Several guests nodded politely. "Some surprises are delightful. Others are educational." Light laughter followed. Victoria's gaze settled upon Genevieve. "The Duchess of Ashmore is certainly an example." The atmosphere shifted immediately. Every experienced member of society recognized danger. Genevieve remained calm. "I hope I am not being used as a cautionary tale." A few people smiled. Victoria did not. "Of course not." Her voice remained sweet. "Merely a fascinating study." Silence deepened. "A study?" Genevieve asked. "Indeed." Victoria lifted her champagne glass. "After all, many young ladies spend years attempting to secure advantageous marriages." Her smile sharpened almost imperceptibly. "It is encouraging to know persistence occasionally succeeds." Several guests looked uncomfortable. The implication was clear. Genevieve had somehow pursued the Duke until marriage became possible. Genevieve felt the insult. So did everyone else. Yet she maintained her composure. "You are very kind." Victoria laughed softly. "Not kind. Practical." Her gaze swept across the group. "Surely we can all agree that becoming Duchess of Ashmore represents quite an achievement." Another pause. Then came the real attack. Particularly for someone whose family circumstances were not especially competitive. The ballroom seemed quieter. Conversations nearby softened. People listened, watched, waited. Genevieve understood exactly what Victoria intended. To suggest she had married for security, for status, for wealth, to reduce years of sacrifice and dignity into a social calculation. The old version of herself might have retreated, might have endured the humiliation silently, might have accepted society's judgment because challenging it felt impossible. But that woman no longer existed. Before Genevieve could respond, another voice entered the conversation. Calm, controlled, dangerous. "I chose my wife." Every person in the circle turned. Sebastian stood only a few feet away. Nobody had heard him approach. Victoria's smile faltered. "Your Grace." Sebastian ignored her greeting. His attention remained entirely on the discussion. "Since we appear to be evaluating historical events, accuracy seems important." The room became silent, completely silent. "No one secured me." His voice remained polite. That somehow made it more powerful. "No one persuaded me. No one manipulated me." Victoria attempted a laugh. "Surely we are only enjoying conversation." "Then allow me to contribute." Sebastian stepped forward. The crowd parted instinctively. "I pursued Lady Genevieve Ashford." Every word landed with deliberate clarity. "I proposed marriage. I requested her answer. I considered myself fortunate when she accepted." Shock spread visibly through the listeners. Victoria's face paled. Sebastian continued. "Any suggestion otherwise reflects imagination rather than fact." No one spoke. No one moved. Across the ballroom dozens of guests had stopped pretending not to listen. Genevieve stood perfectly still. She could scarcely breathe. Sebastian turned toward her then. Not dramatically. Not for performance. Simply because she mattered more than anyone else in the room. "My wife has spent years helping others without seeking recognition." His gaze swept across the crowd. Many people overlooked her. That was their mistake, not hers. The silence became profound. Victoria lowered her eyes. For the first time all evening, she had no response. Genevieve felt something shift inside her. Something old. Something wounded. For years she had endured whispers, dismissal, mockery disguised as politeness. Tonight, for the first time, someone powerful had refused to let those things stand. Not privately, publicly, before everyone. Nathaniel appeared near the edge of the crowd. The expression on his face held unmistakable approval. The Dowager Duchess, standing several yards away, looked dangerously pleased. Eventually conversation resumed. Slowly, carefully. Yet the evening had changed. Everyone knew it. Victoria retreated soon afterward. The damage she intended to inflict had returned entirely upon herself. Hours later, after the gala ended and the carriage carried them home through moonlit streets, Genevieve sat quietly beside Sebastian. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally she turned toward him. "You did not have to do that." Sebastian looked out the window. "Yes, I did." The answer arrived without hesitation. Genevieve studied him carefully. "Why?" For a moment he seemed unable to find words. Then he spoke softly. "Because they were wrong." The carriage continued through the sleeping city. Neither noticed how close they sat. Neither noticed the warmth that lingered between them. Yet both felt it. And for Sebastian, one truth had become impossible to ignore. Protecting Genevieve no longer felt like duty. Felt personal. Very personal. Far more personal than he was prepared to admit. The morning after Lady Beaumont's gala, London awakened to a city buzzing with speculation. News traveled with astonishing speed among aristocratic circles. By breakfast, drawing rooms across Mayfair were discussing the same subject. By luncheon, gentlemen's clubs repeated every detail. By evening, even families who had not attended the gala knew exactly what had occurred. The Duke of Ashmore had publicly defended his wife. Not politely, not discreetly, publicly, decisively, unmistakably. For once, society seemed uncertain how to respond. Some admired him. Others criticized his directness. Many simply found the entire situation irresistible. Genevieve, however, wanted nothing to do with any of it. She spent the morning reviewing charitable reports in the library while attempting to ignore the attention. The effort lasted until Eleanor arrived carrying 3 separate invitations and an expression of pure delight. "You have become legendary." Genevieve did not look up. "That sounds exhausting." "It sounds wonderful." Eleanor settled into a nearby chair. "Do you understand what happened last night?" "Unfortunately, no. You truly do not." Genevieve sighed softly. "Then enlighten me." Eleanor leaned forward. "For years people spoke about you as though you were invisible. That is not entirely inaccurate. It is now." The certainty in her cousin's voice caused Genevieve to pause. Eleanor smiled gently. "Everyone saw what happened. More importantly, everyone saw how he looked at you." Genevieve immediately returned her attention to the papers. "You are imagining things." "I am not." "You absolutely are." Yet even as she spoke, the memory returned. Sebastian's voice. His certainty. The way he had stepped forward without hesitation. The way he had looked directly at her while speaking. She pushed the thought away. It lingered anyway. Across the estate, Sebastian sat through a meeting with 3 neighboring landowners while accomplishing almost nothing. The conversation concerned agricultural planning, crop rotations, future investments. Ordinarily such matters held his complete attention. Today his mind remained elsewhere. "Ashmore." Sebastian looked up. Lord Pembroke stared at him. "You have not heard a word I said." "That is unlikely. You just agreed to support a vineyard." Silence followed. Sebastian frowned. "I dislike vineyards." "Exactly." The room erupted in laughter. Sebastian rubbed a hand across his jaw. "Perhaps I am distracted." "By your Duchess?" another gentleman asked. More laughter followed. Normally he would have ignored the teasing. Instead he found himself oddly defensive. "Genevieve has nothing to do with this." The immediate silence told him he had made a mistake. Lord Pembroke raised an eyebrow. "Genevieve?" Sebastian closed his eyes briefly. The meeting deteriorated from there. Several days later, a charity auction took place in London to raise funds for educational initiatives throughout rural counties. Genevieve had supported the organization for years, long before becoming Duchess of Ashmore. Naturally, she agreed to attend. Sebastian accompanied her. Nathaniel joined them as well. The event occupied a magnificent exhibition hall near Hyde Park. Paintings lined the walls. Rare books filled display cases. Wealthy patrons moved between exhibits discussing philanthropy and social reform. At first, everything proceeded smoothly. Genevieve spent much of the afternoon speaking with teachers, organizers, and local representatives. Unlike many aristocratic events, this gathering focused upon practical results rather than social competition. She found it refreshing. Sebastian enjoyed watching her. More accurately, he enjoyed watching others discover what he had recently learned. Everywhere Genevieve went, people responded warmly. Not because of her title, because of her competence. Several organizers sought her advice. Others thanked her for previous assistance. One elderly schoolmaster nearly became emotional while describing the impact of a grant she had arranged years earlier. Sebastian listened quietly. Pride stirred unexpectedly within him. The feeling surprised him. It also pleased him. Unfortunately, the afternoon contained one final challenge. Lady Victoria Hensley arrived shortly after 4 o'clock. Genevieve noticed her immediately. So did Nathaniel. They exchanged a glance. Neither appeared optimistic. Perhaps she has learned caution, Nathaniel suggested. Genevieve looked unconvinced. That would be a historical first. The prediction proved accurate. Victoria behaved perfectly for nearly an hour. Then she encountered a group of influential guests discussing charitable work. Genevieve happened to be nearby. The timing was unfortunate. I always find philanthropy fascinating, Victoria remarked, particularly when generosity receives proper recognition. Several guests nodded politely. Recognition can encourage others to contribute. Precisely, Victoria smiled. Although anonymity occasionally serves strategic purposes. Genevieve felt the first warning sign. Victoria continued. After all, a carefully managed reputation can become quite valuable. Silence settled gradually around the conversation. Victoria's gaze shifted toward Genevieve. Would you not agree, Your Grace? The trap revealed itself immediately. Genevieve remained calm. I believe motives matter more than appearances. An admirable perspective. Victoria lifted her champagne glass. Especially for someone who benefited so greatly from public sympathy. Several nearby guests stiffened. Nathaniel's expression darkened. Genevieve understood exactly what Victoria implied. That her charitable efforts had been calculated. That her reputation had been manufactured. That her marriage somehow resulted from strategic manipulation rather than character. Before she could respond, another voice entered the discussion. I believe you are mistaken. Everyone turned. Sebastian approached slowly through the crowd. His expression remained perfectly composed. Yet Genevieve recognized the look in his eyes immediately. He was angry, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, which was far more dangerous. Victoria smiled. Your Grace. Sebastian ignored the greeting. My wife performed charitable work for years before most people knew her name. The room fell silent. She donated anonymously. He continued calmly. She accepted no recognition, requested no praise, sought no advantage. Every word landed with measured precision. Victoria attempted a laugh. Surely we are discussing general principles. No. Sebastian's gaze never left hers. We are discussing facts. Several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Others watched with open fascination. Sebastian stepped closer to Genevieve. Not enough to appear theatrical. Just enough to make his position unmistakably clear. The unfortunate reality, he continued, is that many people find genuine kindness difficult to understand. No one spoke. They assume every action conceals ambition because they cannot imagine acting differently themselves. The silence became absolute. Victoria's face flushed. For the second time in a matter of weeks, she found herself publicly outmatched. This time the defeat felt even more complete. Eventually she murmured something about another engagement and departed. The moment she disappeared, conversation resumed cautiously. Yet the atmosphere had changed. Once again, society had witnessed something impossible to ignore. Sebastian remained beside Genevieve throughout the rest of the event. The gesture seemed natural, effortless, yet everyone noticed, including Genevieve. During the carriage ride home, she stared out the window at the passing city lights. "You keep doing that." Sebastian glanced toward her. "Doing what?" "Rescuing me." He considered the statement. "I am not rescuing you." "No, you are perfectly capable of defending yourself." Genevieve smiled faintly. "Then why intervene?" The answer arrived more quickly than he expected. "Because you should not have to fight every battle alone." Neither spoke afterward. Yet the words lingered between them. Later that evening, after dinner ended and the household settled into quiet routine, Genevieve discovered Sebastian standing alone in the conservatory. Moonlight filtered through glass walls. Early spring flowers filled the air with fragrance. He appeared thoughtful. "There you are." He turned. Something softened in his expression when he saw her. The reaction lasted only a moment. Yet Genevieve noticed it. "I was looking for you." "That sounds ominous." "Not this time." A smile touched her lips. They walked slowly through the conservatory. Around them, delicate blossoms opened toward the moonlight. For a while neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable, familiar. Then Genevieve stopped near a flowering orange tree. "Thank you." Sebastian looked at her. "For what?" "For seeing me." The simple statement struck him harder than any elaborate speech could have. For several seconds he could not answer. Because the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. He did see her, more clearly every day. The woman society overlooked. The woman who quietly changed lives. The woman whose happiness mattered far more to him than it should. Genevieve. Her name sounded different in his voice. Softer, more personal. She felt it too. The realization lingered between them. Fragile, unspoken. Then footsteps echoed somewhere beyond the conservatory, breaking the moment. They stepped apart slightly. Reality returned. Yet neither forgot what had almost happened. And later that night, alone in his study, Sebastian finally admitted a truth he could no longer avoid. He was in love with his wife. Completely, irrevocably. The realization should have brought relief. Instead it brought fear. Because for the first time he had something meaningful to lose. And he had no idea whether Genevieve's heart would ever belong to him in the same way. The following week began with rain. Gentle spring rain drifted across the windows of Ashmore House and transformed the gardens into a landscape of silver mist and emerald green. Genevieve welcomed the weather. It provided an excuse to remain indoors and avoid the endless invitations that continued arriving from London. Society had not yet lost interest in the Duchess of Ashmore. If anything, recent events had increased its fascination. She found the attention exhausting. The library became her refuge. On Tuesday afternoon she occupied her favorite chair beside a tall window, surrounded by correspondence related to several charitable projects. A fire burned quietly nearby. The soft sound of rain created a peaceful rhythm against the glass. For the first time in days she felt content. Then a servant arrived carrying a small wooden box. "This was discovered in one of the archive rooms, Your Grace." Genevieve looked up. "Mine?" The housekeeper believed it belonged to His Grace. However, the contents appear quite old. The servant placed the box upon a nearby table and withdrew. Curious, Genevieve crossed the room. The box itself looked ordinary. Dark wood, brass hinges, no lock. She intended only to determine its owner before sending it elsewhere. Instead she discovered a collection of letters tied neatly with faded ribbon. Her first instinct was to leave them untouched. Private correspondence deserved privacy. Then she noticed the handwriting. Sebastian's. The letters had been written years earlier. Long before their marriage. Long before they had even met. Genevieve should have closed the box immediately. Instead her gaze caught a familiar phrase written across the first page of an unfinished draft resting near the top. The words appeared harmless at first. Then she read them more carefully. A suitable wife should be calm, practical, respectable, and unlikely to complicate the obligations attached to my title. Something inside her stilled. She picked up the page. The draft appeared incomplete, perhaps never sent. Several additional pages rested beneath it. She should have stopped reading. She did not. Over the next several minutes, fragments emerged. Conversations with friends, personal reflections, discussions regarding marriage. None contained cruelty. None contained malice. Yet together they revealed a truth she had never considered. Before proposing, Sebastian had approached marriage as a practical necessity, a responsibility, a calculation. One passage struck particularly hard. Beauty fades, passion fades. A sensible woman who creates stability would be preferable to endless drama. Another, I require a partner capable of fulfilling expectations. Affection would be beneficial but not essential. Genevieve lowered the pages slowly. The room suddenly felt colder. Rain continued tapping softly against the windows. The fire continued burning. Nothing had changed. Yet everything had changed. For months she had believed their marriage rested upon mutual respect, shared admiration, genuine choice. Now she faced another possibility. Had she simply been convenient? Had Sebastian chosen her because she appeared safe, predictable, easy, a practical solution rather than a cherished woman? The questions arrived relentlessly. By the time she closed the box, her chest ached. Not because the letters were cruel. They were not. That somehow made them worse. They felt honest. And honesty carried weight. She returned the papers exactly as she had found them. Then she left the library before anyone could see the expression on her face. That evening Sebastian returned from a series of meetings in London. He arrived expecting an ordinary dinner. Instead, he discovered something unusual immediately. Genevieve greeted him warmly, politely, perfectly, yet a distance lingered beneath every interaction. Subtle, almost invisible. Most people would have missed it. He did not. During dinner she smiled when appropriate, asked thoughtful questions, discussed estate matters. Yet she seemed elsewhere, emotionally absent. By the end of the meal, concern had replaced confusion. Later, after the servants cleared the final course, Sebastian followed her into the drawing room. Genevieve. She looked up from a book. Yes. Is something wrong? No. The answer arrived too quickly. Sebastian sat opposite her. You are upset. I am not. You have barely looked at me all evening. Silence followed. Genevieve lowered her gaze briefly. When she looked up again, her expression remained composed. I am simply tired. The explanation sounded reasonable. Unfortunately, he no longer believed it. If something is troubling you, I would like to know. Her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the book. Would you? The question surprised him. Of course. Another pause followed. Then she smiled politely. Too politely. Thank you. Nothing else came. Sebastian understood enough to stop pressing. For the moment. Yet the unease remained. The following days only worsened matters. Genevieve fulfilled every responsibility expected of her. She attended meetings, managed projects, oversaw household affairs. To anyone observing from a distance, nothing appeared unusual. Sebastian knew better. The warmth that had gradually grown between them seemed diminished. Conversations became shorter. Shared moments disappeared. Whenever he approached emotionally vulnerable territory, Genevieve retreated gracefully behind courtesy. The change frightened him more than he cared to admit. On Friday afternoon, he sought advice from the one person least likely to show mercy. His mother. Margaret listened patiently while stirring tea. When he finished describing the situation, she sighed. What did you do? I am asking the same question. Then you definitely did something. Sebastian frowned. That is not helpful. Few truths are. She studied him carefully. Has she learned something? I do not know. Then begin there. The advice proved sound. Unfortunately, it provided no answers. Later that evening Sebastian returned to the library searching for clues. He reviewed correspondence, estate reports, household matters. Nothing seemed unusual. Then he noticed the wooden box resting upon a side table. Recognition struck instantly. He crossed the room and opened it. His stomach dropped. The letters, the unfinished drafts, personal reflections written years earlier. Suddenly everything made sense. He closed his eyes briefly. Idiot! The word escaped under his breath. Because he understood exactly what Genevieve must have seen. Not the man he had become. The man he had once been. A man who viewed marriage through the cold lens of duty and practicality. A man who believed affection optional. A man who had not yet met her. For the first time in months, genuine panic surfaced. The next morning he found Genevieve in the rose garden. Early sunlight illuminated dew-covered petals. Birds moved through flowering hedges. The beauty of the morning contrasted sharply with the tension between them. We need to talk. She looked up from the flowers. Calm. Reserved. Very well. Sebastian stopped beside her. You found the letters. Not a question. A statement. Genevieve's expression revealed enough. Yes. Silence stretched between them. I should have destroyed them years ago. She looked away toward the garden paths. Why? Because they no longer reflect the truth. The answer arrived immediately. Genevieve absorbed the words quietly. Then she asked the question he had been dreading. Why did you choose me? Sebastian felt his heart sink. Not because he lacked an answer. Because he feared the answer might arrive too late. Genevieve, please. Her voice remained calm. That frightened him more than anger would have. I need honesty. He drew a slow breath. At the beginning? She nodded. The truth stood between them. Impossible to avoid. At the beginning, I admired your intelligence and character. He met her gaze directly. I believed we would make excellent partners. A faint sadness entered her eyes. Exactly. The single word cut deeper than any accusation. Because now he understood. She had read the letters and concluded that practicality had been the entire foundation of their marriage. She believed she had been selected rather than cherished. Chosen rather than loved. Sebastian stepped closer. That was not all. Perhaps not. Her smile carried no warmth. But it was enough. The distance between them suddenly felt enormous. For months he had moved steadily toward her. Toward trust. Toward affection. Toward love. Now, for the first time, she was moving away. And he had no idea how to stop it. As Genevieve walked back toward the house, Sebastian remained standing among the roses. Helpless. Watching her leave. Understanding at last what true fear felt like. Because losing someone mattered only when they had already become part of your heart. And whether he admitted it or not, Genevieve had become exactly that. For the first time since their marriage, Ashmore House felt too large. The halls remained as elegant as ever. The gardens still bloomed beneath the warming spring sun. Servants moved through their duties with quiet efficiency. Nothing visible had changed. Yet Sebastian felt the difference everywhere. It existed in silences that had not existed before. In conversations that ended too quickly. In smiles that never quite reached Genevieve's eyes. The distance between them was never dramatic. That made it worse. Anger could be confronted. Arguments could be resolved. This quiet withdrawal seemed far more difficult to reach. 3 days passed. Then 4. Sebastian found himself noticing every absence. Breakfast conversations became shorter. Evening walks disappeared entirely. Shared moments in the library grew rare. Genevieve remained kind, respectful, gracious, yet she felt increasingly unreachable. One evening he entered the music room and found her seated near an open window. A book rested in her lap. Golden sunlight streamed across the polished floor. She looked peaceful, yet the sight filled him with unexpected sadness. She had never seemed farther away. May I join you? She looked up. Of course. Sebastian sat opposite her. For several moments neither spoke. Somewhere outside, birds sang among flowering trees. I miss you. The words escaped before he could reconsider them. Surprise flickered across her face. Genuine surprise. Then came a faint sadness. I am still here. Not really. Silence followed. Genevieve lowered her eyes briefly. Sebastian. I know what those letters said. His voice remained quiet. I know how they must have sounded. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the book. They sounded honest. The answer hurt because it was true. They were. He forced himself not to look away. At the time, she met his gaze. And that is the problem. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then Genevieve closed the book and placed it beside her chair. You chose me because I was practical. No, because I was sensible. Partly. A shadow crossed her expression. Sebastian immediately regretted the word. Genevieve, you wanted stability. I wanted a partner. Exactly. Her voice remained calm. Too calm. You wanted a duchess. The accusation carried no anger. Only disappointment. Somehow that felt far worse. I wanted you. The statement hung between them. Yet even as he spoke it, Sebastian understood the problem. She believed he was describing the present. The letters described the past. And the gap between those two truths had become a wall neither seemed able to cross. Later that night, long after Genevieve retired, Sebastian remained awake in his study. A fire burned low in the hearth. Shadows flickered across shelves lined with books. The unfinished letters rested open on his desk. He had reread them countless times over the past several days. Each reading produced fresh frustration, not because the words were cruel, because they reflected a version of himself he barely recognized. A younger man, a colder man, a man who viewed marriage as responsibility rather than possibility. The realization arrived slowly, then all at once. He loved her, completely, yet he had never actually said the words. Not once. He had defended her publicly, protected her, admired her, respected her, but he had never told her the truth. Perhaps because the truth frightened him. Perhaps because he assumed there would always be more time. Now time felt dangerously uncertain. The following afternoon Nathaniel arrived unexpectedly. One look at Sebastian's face convinced him something was wrong. Good heavens! Nathaniel removed his gloves. You look terrible. Sebastian almost laughed. Thank you. I pride myself on honesty. He settled into a chair opposite the Duke. What happened? Ordinarily Sebastian would never discuss personal matters. Today he found himself doing exactly that. 20 minutes later Nathaniel sat silently processing the explanation. Finally he sighed. You truly are an idiot. Sebastian stared at him. That seems to be a popular opinion. Because it is accurate. Nathaniel shook his head. Do you know what Genevieve spent most of her life believing? Probably several things. That she was never anyone's first choice. The words landed heavily. Nathaniel continued. People overlooked her constantly, ignored her, dismissed her. His expression softened. She never complained, never blamed anyone. But she noticed. Sebastian looked away. I know. Do you? Nathaniel leaned forward. Because if she believes you chose her for convenience, you have confirmed every fear she ever carried. Silence filled the room. Nathaniel rarely spoke harshly. The fact that he did so now made the truth impossible to ignore. Then what am I supposed to do? Sebastian asked quietly. Nathaniel studied him for several seconds, then smiled sadly. Tell her the truth. I have. No. Nathaniel shook his head. You explained yourself. That is different. Sebastian frowned. What does that mean? It means you keep talking about the past. Nathaniel stood. Stop explaining who you were. Tell her who you are. After he left, Sebastian remained seated for a long time. The advice sounded simple. It was not, because telling Genevieve the truth required admitting something he had never admitted aloud. Not to his mother, not to his friends, not even to himself until recently. That evening Genevieve attended a charity committee meeting in a nearby village. Sebastian accompanied her. The journey passed mostly in silence. Not uncomfortable silence. Sad silence. The kind that appears when two people wish to speak, but cannot find the right words. Upon arrival, Genevieve immediately immersed herself in work. Teachers approached with questions. Community leaders requested guidance. Volunteers sought approval for new projects. She handled every challenge with her usual grace. Sebastian watched from a distance. as he often did now. More than once he noticed people smiling when she entered conversations. Others relaxed visibly around her. Trust followed her naturally. Admiration followed as well. An elderly woman approached during the meeting and took Genevieve's hands. "You helped my grandson attend school." Genevieve looked surprised. "I only assisted with a scholarship." "You changed his life." Tears filled the woman's eyes. "He reads every evening now." Emotion tightened unexpectedly in Sebastian's chest. The woman moved away moments later. Genevieve returned quietly to her work. She never seemed comfortable receiving praise. Another reason he loved her. The realization came so naturally now that it barely startled him. Love. The word existed everywhere. In every glance. Every conversation. Every absence. The problem was that Genevieve did not know. As dusk settled over the village, the meeting finally ended. People departed gradually. The building emptied. Eventually only a handful remained. Genevieve stood near a window organizing documents when Sebastian approached. "May I walk with you?" She looked up. "Of course." They stepped outside together. The evening air felt cool and fragrant with spring blossoms. Lanterns glowed along the village road. For a while they walked without speaking. Then Genevieve stopped beside a small stone bridge overlooking a narrow stream. Water moved gently beneath the fading light. "You have been trying very hard." Sebastian looked at her. "What do you mean?" "To fix this." Sadness touched her smile. "I know." The admission surprised him. "Then why does it still feel impossible?" Genevieve's gaze drifted toward the water below. "Because I do not know what is real anymore." The honesty in her voice nearly broke him. "Everything between us feels real to me." She closed her eyes briefly. "That is easy to say now. Because it is true. Perhaps." Her voice softened. "But sometimes I wonder whether you would have chosen me if I had been different." Sebastian felt as though the ground vanished beneath him. Because for the first time he truly understood her fear. Not that he once viewed marriage practically. That she believed his love depended upon conditions, qualifications, usefulness. That she still did not know her own worth through his eyes. "Genevieve." She looked at him. Moonlight touched her face. "I would choose you 1,000 times." The words escaped before he could stop them. Silence followed. Complete silence. Emotion flickered briefly across her expression. Then disappeared. Because she did not believe him. Not completely. Not yet. The realization hurt more than anything else. They resumed walking moments later. Neither spoke again. Yet as Sebastian watched her disappear into the waiting carriage, one truth became absolutely clear. He was losing her. Not physically. Not socially. Emotionally. And unless he found a way to show her exactly what she meant to him, the distance between them might become permanent. For the first time in his life, the powerful Duke of Ashmore felt utterly powerless. And the feeling terrified him. By early May, London stood at the height of the social season. Every ballroom glittered. Every drawing room overflowed with conversation. Every aristocratic family seemed determined to host the most memorable event of the year. Yet beneath the music, the laughter, and the endless stream of invitations, Genevieve carried a quiet ache she could not entirely escape. She continued her work, continued her responsibilities, continued her charitable efforts. To everyone around her, she appeared exactly the same. Only those who knew her best noticed the difference. Eleanor noticed. Nathaniel noticed. Most of all, Sebastian noticed. The distance remained. Not dramatic. Not hostile. Merely persistent. Like a door left slightly closed. One afternoon, while Genevieve reviewed educational reports in the library, a formal invitation arrived bearing an elaborate gold seal. The annual Royal Society Benefit Gala. One of the most prestigious charitable events in England. Nobility from across the kingdom attended. Politicians, philanthropists, influential families, community leaders. It was not merely a social event. It was a public stage. "You will attend, of course." Genevieve looked up as the Dowager Duchess entered the room. "I suspect refusal is impossible." Margaret smiled faintly. "Probably." She settled into a nearby chair. This year's organizers intend to recognize several charitable initiatives. Genevieve immediately looked uncomfortable. That sounds dreadful. Naturally, the older woman laughed softly, which is precisely why it amuses me. Genevieve smiled despite herself. Yet once the Dowager Duchess departed, her gaze remained fixed upon the invitation. For reasons she could not explain, unease settled quietly inside her. 3 nights later, the gala transformed one of London's grandest assembly halls into a spectacle of elegance and influence. Crystal chandeliers illuminated hundreds of guests. Fresh flowers filled every corner. A full orchestra performed beneath painted ceilings. The atmosphere shimmered with wealth, prestige, and expectation. Genevieve entered beside Sebastian. For a moment neither spoke. The journey there had been unusually quiet. Not uncomfortable, merely uncertain. They had become careful around one another. Too careful. The realization saddened them both. Inside the hall, guests greeted them warmly. Some with genuine affection, others with strategic enthusiasm. The Duchess of Ashmore had become one of society's most admired figures. The irony was not lost on Genevieve. The same people who once overlooked her now sought her attention eagerly. As the evening progressed, she found herself speaking with educators, charitable organizers, and community leaders from across England. Those conversations felt meaningful, real. They reminded her why she had always preferred service to social competition. Meanwhile, Sebastian moved through the crowd, performing the obligations attached to his title. Yet his attention returned repeatedly to one person. Always her. Nathaniel noticed. So did Margaret. Neither commented. At least not publicly. An hour into the event, the chairman of the Royal Society stepped onto a raised platform. Gradually conversation faded. Guests turned toward the stage. The evening's formal recognitions were about to begin. Several awards were presented. Educational achievements, community development efforts, medical initiatives. Applause followed each announcement. Then the chairman unfolded another document. His expression brightened noticeably. Our next recognition concerns charitable contributions that have transformed communities across multiple counties during the past several years. Genevieve immediately lost interest. Public recognition made her deeply uncomfortable. She turned toward a nearby conversation. Then she heard a familiar detail. Anonymous educational grants, rural assistance programs, emergency relief funding. Her attention snapped back toward the stage. A strange feeling settled in her stomach. The chairman continued. For many years, the identity of this benefactor remained unknown. Genevieve felt her pulse quicken. No, surely not. Across the room, Sebastian went very still. He knew exactly what was coming. The chairman smiled. Tonight we are honored to recognize Her Grace, Genevieve Wickliffe, Duchess of Ashmore. Silence. Complete silence. Then every head in the ballroom turned toward her. Genevieve froze. Shock flooded her expression. She had never submitted her name, never sought acknowledgement, never wanted attention. Applause erupted throughout the hall, yet she could barely hear it. "Oh dear," Eleanor whispered somewhere nearby. Nathaniel looked openly delighted. The Dowager Duchess appeared entirely too innocent. Genevieve narrowed her eyes slightly. Margaret suddenly became fascinated by a flower arrangement. The chairman continued speaking. He described schools rebuilt through anonymous donations, families protected during difficult winters, communities strengthened through years of quiet support. Every sentence revealed another piece of a story Genevieve had spent years hiding. Emotion rose unexpectedly in her chest. Not because of the praise, because these were lives. Real people, real struggles, real victories. The applause continued. Then something unexpected happened. Sebastian stepped forward. Murmurs spread instantly through the crowd. He crossed the ballroom with calm determination, reached the platform, requested permission to speak. The chairman looked surprised but agreed immediately. Silence returned. Hundreds of people watched. Genevieve's heart began racing. Sebastian accepted the podium. For a moment he simply looked at the audience. Then he spoke. "Many of you know my wife, His voice carried easily through the hall. At least you believe you do. The room remained perfectly still. You know the Duchess of Ashmore. He paused. The woman who attends charitable functions. The woman who manages estates. The woman who supports worthy causes. His gaze shifted briefly toward Genevieve. Something vulnerable appeared there. Something she had never seen before. What many of you do not know is how long she has been changing lives. No one moved. No one interrupted. Sebastian continued. Years before she became a duchess, she was helping struggling families. Years before she entered this society spotlight, she was funding schools. Years before anyone praised her character, she was demonstrating it. Emotion thickened his voice slightly. Genevieve noticed. So did everyone else. When her own family faced hardship, she sacrificed personal comfort to protect others. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. When recognition became available, she declined it. When gratitude was offered, she redirected it. When praise appeared, she avoided it. Silence deepened. Sebastian looked directly at the crowd. For years, many people failed to see her. The words landed heavily. Too many people remembered exactly how true that statement had once been. Including me. A ripple moved through the audience. Genevieve's breath caught. Sebastian had never spoken publicly about himself this way. Never exposed weakness. Never admitted fault. Yet he continued. I believed I understood what made someone extraordinary. His gaze found hers again. I was wrong. The honesty in those words seemed to echo through the hall. The remarkable thing about Genevieve is not her intelligence. Though she possesses more of it than anyone I know. Soft laughter followed. It is not her generosity, though countless people have benefited from it. His voice softened. It is that she never believed those qualities made her special. Emotion blurred Genevieve's vision. She did not care who saw. Sebastian stepped away from the podium. Then, before all of London society, before politicians, aristocrats, and influential families, before everyone who had ever overlooked her, dismissed her, or underestimated her, he crossed the ballroom and stopped directly before her. Silence filled every corner of the hall. Genevieve! Her name sounded unlike any other word in the world. She looked up at him. Tears shimmered in her eyes. He did not care. I spent years believing practicality mattered most. His voice remained steady. Then I met you. No one moved. No one breathed. You changed every certainty I had. Emotion tightened visibly in his expression. The powerful Duke of Ashmore looked suddenly, unmistakably human. You taught me what kindness looks like. What strength looks like. What courage looks like. Genevieve felt tears escape despite every effort to stop them. Sebastian stepped closer. And somewhere along the way, without my permission and certainly without my planning, you became the most important person in my life. A collective silence swept through the room. No scandal. No gossip. No judgment. Just silence. Because every person present understood they were witnessing something real. Something rare. Sebastian's gaze never left hers. I love you. The words arrived simply, honestly, without performance, without hesitation. Not because you are practical. Not because you are intelligent. Not because you are capable. His voice softened further. I love you because you are you. Tears blurred Genevieve's vision completely now. For months she had feared being chosen for usefulness, for convenience, for stability. In that moment every fear began dissolving. Not because he explained the past, because he revealed the present. And the truth standing before her was impossible to doubt. The ballroom disappeared. The crowd disappeared. The entire world seemed to narrow until only one person remained. The man who looked at her as though she was extraordinary. The man who finally understood her worth. The man whose heart now stood completely exposed before everyone. And for the first time since finding those letters, Genevieve believed him. Completely. For a moment, no one in the ballroom moved. The orchestra remained silent. The crowd remained silent. Even the air itself seemed suspended between one heartbeat and the next. Genevieve stood motionless as tears slipped down her cheeks. Not because she had been publicly praised. Not because hundreds of people were watching. Not because one of the most powerful men in England had just declared his love before all of society. She cried because, for the first time in her life, she felt completely seen. Sebastian remained where he stood. He did not attempt to rush her answer. He did not fill the silence with explanations. He had spent months learning that Genevieve deserved honesty. He had finally given it. Now the choice belonged to her. The seconds stretched. Then Genevieve laughed softly through her tears. The sound carried through the ballroom. Warm, emotional, beautiful. You truly are impossible. Relief flashed across Sebastian's face so quickly that several nearby guests smiled. I have been informed of that repeatedly. A ripple of laughter spread through the audience. Genevieve shook her head. You could have told me privately. I know. Instead you chose an audience of several hundred people. In my defense, it seemed efficient. More laughter followed. Even Genevieve could not stop smiling. Yet beneath the humor lived something deeper. Something far more important. She stepped closer. The distance between them disappeared. I believed those letters. Her voice softened. For a while I truly believed them. Pain flickered briefly across Sebastian's expression. I know. I thought perhaps you had chosen me because I was useful. The admission seemed to hurt him. Genevieve. She lifted a hand gently. Let me finish. He nodded immediately. I spent years being overlooked. Emotion trembled quietly beneath her words. After enough time, you begin believing people only value what you can do for them. Silence returned. Not uncomfortable. Respectful. Honest. Genevieve looked directly into his eyes. Then you spent months proving the opposite. The crowd disappeared again. Neither of them seemed aware of anyone else. You defended me when it would have been easier to stay silent. You respected me before you loved me. You saw things in me that I never saw in myself. Tears returned despite her efforts. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you too. A collective sigh moved through the ballroom. Several ladies openly reached for handkerchiefs. Nathaniel looked extraordinarily pleased. The Dowager Duchess appeared moments away from victory over the entire world. Sebastian simply stared at Genevieve. You love me. She laughed softly. I thought that part was obvious. The smile that appeared on his face transformed him completely. Not because it was dramatic, because it was real. Free of restraint. Free of caution. Free of every wall he had spent years building around himself. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, the Duke of Ashmore looked completely happy. Applause erupted throughout the ballroom. Guests rose to their feet. Some cheered. Others laughed. Several wiped away tears. The chairman of the Royal Society looked delighted. Even the orchestra resumed playing a gentle melody. Yet Sebastian barely noticed any of it. His attention remained entirely upon the woman standing before him. There is one more thing. Genevieve blinked. One more thing. Yes. A familiar look entered his eyes. The look that usually preceded ambitious plans. That concerns me. It should. Before she could ask another question, Sebastian reached into his coat pocket. Confusion spread across her face. Then surprise. Then complete disbelief. He produced a small velvet box. Laughter erupted from several corners of the room. Genevieve covered her mouth. Sebastian. The first proposal was inadequate. Inadequate. Entirely. He opened the box. Inside rested a ring. Elegant. Beautiful. Simple. The first time I offered partnership. His voice softened. This time I am offering everything. Tears filled Genevieve's eyes once more. You cannot possibly be proposing again. I absolutely am. More laughter followed. Sebastian ignored it. Genevieve Ashford. His gaze never left hers. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of choosing me again? The ballroom waited. Genevieve looked around the room briefly. Hundreds of people watched with delighted anticipation. Then she looked back at her husband, the man who had once viewed marriage as duty, the man who now stood before an entire society with his heart exposed, the man she loved. Yes, the answer arrived instantly. Although if you continue proposing in public, I may begin charging admission. The ballroom exploded with laughter and applause. Sebastian slipped the ring onto her finger. Then, unable to stop himself, he laughed too. The sound surprised everyone. Most of all himself. Months later, summer sunlight poured across Ashmore Estate. The world looked entirely different. Gardens flourished beneath clear blue skies. Roses climbed stone walls. Children laughed in nearby villages. Schools continued expanding. Charitable projects thrived. Life moved forward. One afternoon Genevieve stood beneath the shade of an ancient oak tree overlooking rolling green fields. A gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers across the countryside. She held a stack of reports against her chest while reviewing plans for a new educational initiative. Some habits never changed. I knew I would find you working. Genevieve smiled before turning around. And yet you came anyway. Sebastian crossed the grass toward her. I have become very attached to your company. How unfortunate. Tragic, really? He stopped beside her. The ease between them felt natural now. Comfortable. Earned. Months earlier such moments would have seemed impossible. Now they simply felt like home. Sebastian glanced toward the reports. Another school? 2 schools. Of course. Children continue existing despite your apparent objections. A constant inconvenience. Genevieve laughed. The sound still affected him exactly the same way. Perhaps it always would. For a moment they stood together overlooking the estate. Below them, life unfolded peacefully. Families worked fields. Carriages traveled winding roads. Villages thrived. The future stretched ahead. Bright and uncertain and full of possibility. Sebastian reached for her hand. She intertwined her fingers with his automatically. What are you thinking about? He asked. Genevieve considered the question. How strange life is. That sounds philosophical. I spent years believing I was invisible. Her gaze moved across the landscape. Now I realize I was simply standing in the wrong place. Sebastian looked at her quietly. You were never invisible. Emotion softened her smile. No. She squeezed his hand gently. I know that now. A few months later, when autumn returned to England once more, Ashmore House celebrated another joyful announcement. The news spread quickly through family, friends, and neighboring estates. The Duke and Duchess of Ashmore were expecting their first child. The Dowager Duchess nearly frightened several servants with her enthusiasm. Eleanor cried. Nathaniel claimed complete credit despite possessing absolutely none. Sebastian spent the entire day smiling for reasons he could not explain. Genevieve simply looked happy. Deeply. Quietly. Completely happy. On a crisp autumn evening, as golden leaves drifted across the estate grounds, they walked together through the gardens. The same gardens where uncertainty had once existed, where fears had lingered, where questions remained unanswered. Now none of those shadows remained. Sebastian paused beside a rose arbor and looked toward his wife. She caught him staring immediately. You are doing it again. Doing what? Looking at me as though I am a miracle. He considered the accusation seriously. That is because you are. Genevieve rolled her eyes, then smiled, then slipped her hand into his. Together they continued walking beneath the fading light. Ahead lay family, purpose, love, a future they would build side by side. And behind them remained every whisper, every dismissal, every moment society failed to see the woman who had always been extraordinary. In the end, those people had been wrong. Not because Genevieve changed. She had always possessed intelligence, kindness, strength, and quiet courage. The difference was that someone finally looked closely enough to notice. And once he did, he never stopped.